Hi, my name is Barry Crampton. Welcome to another edition of Confessions of a Car Salesman. This one is called Barrie Buellers Day Off. So it was my introduction to fleet sales. Back in the 80s, I worked for a main dealer in the volume franchise. The management were terrible. The DP was so tight, he used to sit in his office with the heating on full blast, while the rest of us were sat in the showroom, freezing to death. The showroom was massive, and it was heated by two big pipes with fins all round that ran round the back walls. They only worked when the valve was switched on. The dealer principal used to go out at about 11:30 and come back about 2 o'clock. After he'd been for his lunch, he'd come back looking slightly worse for wear and reeking a little bit of beer. I hated working for this guy, and I used to amuse myself and the other lads by turning the heating on full blast as soon as he left the building, and then when I saw his car pulling onto the forecourt, I'd run into the corner, turn it off again, and then he'd come in, and as soon as he walked in, he'd be thinking, God, it's warm in here. And then I could see him trying to turn the valve off because the pipes were red hot, but of course it had already been turned off. Now, I worked on a commission-only basis. The product was pretty undesirable at the time. The working conditions were terrible. When you did sell a car, the workshop robbed you blind for reconditioning, and what was left, I later found out, was subject to a dealer principal tax. This was exchanged at the local cash and carry for groceries and booze. At Christmas, the dealer principal's car was loaded up so much that the boot was almost scraping the floor at the back. The team of salesmen took it in turns for showroom duty, leaving every other day free for prospecting or delivery of vehicles and paperwork. These off-duty days seemed to last forever. At the time, I couldn't think further than payday at the end of the month, so prospecting for the future, which I knew wouldn't exist for me at this place, was a complete waste of time. I'd just got a new demonstrator and also my weekly petrol allowance. It was a beautiful sunny day and I wasn't on sales. My mind was working overtime, trying to come up with a plausible excuse to go out for the day. Then it suddenly dawned on me: fleet sales. So I went to see the sales manager and asked if I could go out to the local industrial estates and introduce myself to the transport managers of the local businesses. Never missing an opportunity to kiss the dealer principal's backside, the sales manager went and told him that he'd come up with this idea to increase our sales and was sending me out to canvass the local industrial estates. With my pass signed, I promptly went and picked my girlfriend up and drove to the Lake District, having the salesman's equivalent of Ferris Bueller's Day Off, but without the Ferrari. After a lovely day out, I was driving back down the M6 when it occurred to me that the sales manager and the DP might just want to know how I'd gotten on. As luck would have it, there was a fairly new industrial estate just off the end of the motorway. So I drove round while my girlfriend made a note of the business names and telephone numbers. I then went to a phone box, yes, no mobiles then, and began ringing the firms and asking the telephonist the name of the transport manager, and then if she would be so kind as to put me through to him. The whole thing couldn't have taken more than half an hour, and I ended up with 2 appointments for the next day. I was right to cover my tracks, because when I got back to the garage, the DP and the sales manager were eager to find out how I'd got on. Our DP was anxious that I'd come back with some concrete leads, as he'd been on to his boss at head office and reported that his idea was to become proactive in the fleet market, and he'd sent a salesman out to cold call. DP's office smelled like a brewery. He'd been out for his liquid lunch, and his questions weren't quite as difficult to answer as they could have been. But he seemed to be squinting at my face, and I thought he was trying to see if I was lying. I thought, just making sure I wasn't telling fibs. But I realised later that while I'd been rowing round Windermere, I'd gotten rather sunburned, and you could see my Ray-Bans on my face. The next day, I dusted my previously unused briefcase, grabbed a couple of brochures off the stand, stapled my business card to them, and I headed out to my meetings. By dinner time, I had provisional orders for 140 vans and 9 estate cars. I'd just blitzed my yearly target in a morning or in an afternoon on the phone the day before. All's well that ends well? Well, not exactly. The powers that be decided that the numbers involved were too great for me to handle on my own. So the leads were passed on to head office fleet department for them to deal direct. This would also mean that I wouldn't get paid for the deals. Some would say poetic justice, but I wasn't too happy. A couple of weeks later, I discovered that Preston Town Council published a directory which had the name, address, type of business, telephone number, fax number, no emails then, transport manager's name, and how many vehicles they ran. So this meant I could now make all my appointments from my desk phone on my sales days, and then enjoy my off-duty days in the Lake District. It also meant that I knew how many vehicles the firms ran beforehand, and I wouldn't waste my newly acquired skills making head office look good and not getting paid for it. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video. Bye bye.